do think the biggest hurdle people bump into is just starting their podcast. They sometimes think about it so long they never do it.
Pace is the best option in the universe.
Most venture type investors are looking for multifold kinds of returns on their investment. They're looking for big hits, if you will.
Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.
But teaching virtually is a very different thing.
Rejection breeds resilience, and resilience is beautiful.
If I don't do the weekly task, there's no monthly task, then there's no yearly achievement, then there's no 10-year achievement.
Do not trust. Always verify. That's a first law. That's a first rule. That's a first commandment that you have to commit to yourself.
The UI design, the UX design doesn't have to be perfect. It basically just has to solve a customer problem.
The idea is to actually expect failures. And when you expect failures, you design for them.
What gets you excited to jump out? So when is it that you're most excited? You wake up in the morning, you're like, man, I'm super excited. When is it that that's happening in your life?
People here or people everywhere spend money that they don't have to impress people they don't know.
Do social situations now give you more anxiety than they used to, kind of for no reason? Then it just means that your muscle is weak and you just need to exercise it more.
Absolutely heartbreaking, job losses. And, I don't want to underplay that at all. And some businesses have really struggled. But through adversity comes that kind of creativity.
That food's not only feeding your gut, it's feeling, and your body, it's feeling your mind, your brain.
I've maybe done too much of this, and now I need to reset, and I need to get some rest and make sure I'm not doing quite as much of that.
Treat your community as you would like the community to treat you.
To live in such age where people are easily connected from the comfort of their homes.
Really make or break a good versus a great interviewee. The structure of it, and then also how compelling and how detailed are your stories.
The concept of hybrid renewable technologies has come up since the past few years.
When Columbus sailed, he was sailing under the auspices of the Spanish Inquisition, and that was about to destroy everything in the Western Hemisphere, socially.
So I just tell them 3 words: trust the process.
That means you can edit out all you need to.
So I think we had a conversation towards the beginning of the month, actually. So how was your month like?
Oh, we've really it's been busy, but also just the amount of interest and potential partnerships that we're starting to get has been very encouraging. Everyone sees the value in what we're doing, especially other business service providers, and so it's kind of like once you start talking to 2 or 3, all of a sudden it opens up for everybody. So it's been very encouraging.
And when you are talking to, let's say, all the different service providers or companies, right? What do you think is the problem they are not able to identify that you are trying to solve?
I learned that talking directly to the end company, which we would consider, I guess, in this case, the consumer business, hasn't worked because this is one of those problems that I can't put a dollar value on what I can save a business owner, or I can't give an immediate, tangible, here's what we're going to give you or sell you, or how we're going to improve things. In a very short amount of time to explain that, which that's the way the world works now. If I can't give it to you in 30 seconds, you don't want to hear it. So unfortunately, finding that early on, finding that working with other service providers is more productive. It's great because working with them, say, for example, yesterday, I talked with a business strategy company here locally in Greenville that, they they're concerned with, they basically do outsourced COO work for other companies.
Mhm.
And so, business strategy is their thing. And they understand that data strategy
Mhm.
is a core component of that. And so the ask for me has started to regularly become, hey, we need you to take a deep dive with us into the organizational function and see, do they have good data quality? Do they understand where things come from? Does the organizational structure support good data use and data strategy? And, what's their data literacy like? All of these things in the context of the greater business strategy, those make way more sense than just, hey, you need a good data strategy. Well, why? So
Yeah.
if I explain that in a bubble, it's not nearly as effective as when we're able to partner with other service providers who are already making the case.
Hmm. So the term that you are using, right, that data strategy, I think I read a lot about it online, and I also hear a lot of people use it, right, left, and center.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but for some reason, right, I never felt that they really understand it that well. I mean, the amount of times you see these words going around, it
Mm-hmm.
almost becomes a marketing jargon rather than
That's right.
something that is of substance. So could you elaborate more on, for example, what is data strategy and
Mm-hmm.
like the basics of it, so we can take it from there.
Yeah. So just like the term data scientist, has a lot of different meanings depending on who you're talking to, right?
Yeah.
So, at its very core, I would say data strategy is making sure. Well, wait, let me back up. Business intelligence and data science, at its again very base definitions, means extracting meaning from raw data. So if we take that little nugget and we connect it, then sort of breadcrumbs to business strategy, we say, how do we make that meaning? Number one, support our employees and our core mission. How do we make that support our bottom line and profitability? And how do we make sure that we treat data not as this thing that we just have to deal with, it's sort of a byproduct of our business processes, but how do we make that core in our business processes and is always front and center, because that's the lifeblood of our business.
Okay. And I was going through resume actually, and I learned that you have been doing it for years now. So
Mhm.
how was your perception when it got started, and how
Well,
it changed as you went deeper into it?
starting out, I was just like every other, I guess, business user, where I saw all the attractive stuff, right? The AI, the dashboards, the graphs, doing multiple regression, and I remember getting started with statistics,
Yeah.
because I was not that great in college math, but statistics, I took every course I could and loved it, and just being able to tell a story from stats was just this great epiphany for me. Um, so then you fast forward to, okay, now I'm doing this for business users, and I had to sort of put the fancy stuff on the back burner and go, okay, let's stick with reporting and simple dashboards and things like that. Well, it's almost like flipping that again, where okay, the dashboards and the stuff you see as the end result, that's really not where we need to start, but it's where a lot of people want to start. So the progression for me has been, from individual contributor and builder to, working first, starting with the attractive stuff like everybody does, and then realizing, okay, really we need to make sure our data's right. So getting more into database administration and design, and then even going deeper and realizing, okay, the data isn't coming in correctly or the quality is bad because the procedures and the people process around all that is not good. So it's been, sort of pivoting at these critical steps and realizing, okay, there's more behind the curtain on each piece.
I see. And I would like to, introduce, I think, what you are doing right now. And I think with this, we can also introduce you and begin the show.
Yeah.
So I I remember the first time we had a conversation, you made a very good case that a lot of companies want to implement data, but the way they are going about it is that they focus way too much on the tools and the technologies. And
That's right.
a lot of people are, not avoiding per se, but I think they're not educated about the cultural aspect of it. And that's where you guys come in the picture. So would you introduce yourself and what you are trying to do with Logicle? Is that the right
Logical.
Logical? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
With Logical, and let's take it off from there.
All right. So I've been in the space, oh gosh, how long? For over a decade now. And I saw exactly what you just said. I saw that companies are really more interested in, and not, not any fault of anyone's. Companies are interested in the tangible things, the tools, and the colorful dashboards and fancy stuff, buzzwords like AI and ML.
Yeah.
And we're really the industry is catching up and understanding that the processes behind them need to be addressed. But I decided to go a step further and look at how does an organization's different components, meaning the departments and teams, how do they affect analytics adoption and readiness and maturity? And that was my doctoral research, and that's also the foundation for the company Logicle.
Mhm. Okay. And would you share more as to what you learned during the doctoral research and how you eventually made a decision to what this can be more than research. This can actually be a company of its own. Like how did that happen?
Yeah. They sort of happened parallel. So about the same time I was starting to decide on what I wanted to do for my research question and hypotheses, I was working as a chief data consultant for an IT company, and we were at a consumer manufactured, or what, CPG, consumer product goods. We were at a company that did cosmetics, and this was about 200 people. And the original request was, we want better reports in our reporting suite. And I just kept seeing that, well, wait a minute, we really need to talk about everything that goes into that. We need to talk about your processes. We need to talk about the fact that you have like 4 different systems of record that don't reconcile with each other. All of these things. And not only did we have siloed data, but we had siloed experiences and perspective from all the teams. And it really became apparent to me that I had a great opportunity for research here, because the data and research to date only had examined analytics maturity and culture at the organizational level. Like, they say, well, this company they characterize it as one thing. Well, organizations are made up of teams, and those teams are made of people. And those teams have very diverse priorities and cultures, because there was quite enough research on what's called occupational cultures, meaning, departments, accounting, IT, business, whatever. There was enough research there to say these things exist. So if we know they exist, then why are we not looking at data culture at the team level as opposed to just the broad organizational level? So that became my research question and investigation, and I was able to modify the the survey that we had done at the beginning of the engagement, I was able to take that and add more to it to cover everything I wanted to investigate. And that really, the early results from that encouraged me to keep going, because I saw, yes, there is a difference here. And then the question became, okay, well, if there are these different sort of archetypes within different teams, then how do they affect analytics adoption and maturity and literacy? So that's how we got to where we are. And originally I was using that as basically, a diagnostic tool for my practice in analytics consulting, doing the same stuff, building data warehouses and lakes, and doing a lot of Python work and a lot of deployment for Tableau and Looker and Power BI and that sort of thing. And as I worked to build the business, I started realizing, wait a minute, the tool here is not like everybody's doing analytics consulting. Why try to be one more person in that crowded space? Why don't we offer something to not just analytics consulting firms and service providers, but all these other verticals that we've identified, as possible possible partners. So software providers, consulting firms, brand strategy firms, HR and talent management, enterprise software providers. So there's just so many. And there's another one that just came on board that we're talking with. I didn't even, it just was out of the blue. Companies that do due diligence in like mergers and acquisitions, but on the data, not necessarily on the other assets, but on the data as an asset. So that seemed like a much easier road to go down, because I'm not having to make the case to, as I said earlier in our call, in our recording, not making the case to the business owners directly, because their minds are just not there, and they shouldn't be, right? They got to run the business. So being able to connect with the other partners who get it, who may already be engaged with those companies and see the need, that's where we realized this is where we should be.
So while you were discussing about your process of the research, you mentioned that you were able to find these archetypes in various teams, and I think I'm rephrasing it definitely, that all the archetypes have a different perspective.
That's right.
And they have a different way of doing things. And because of that, there are silos of information and data in a single organization, right? So do you think it has happened because of the natural progression of things, that when all these companies started, let's say back in 2000 and 2005 and 10, nobody expected that we will start collecting and processing data at this scale. So nobody really took a long-term perspective back then, and that's how we are here, where everything is very siloed. Is that the case?
I think that's exactly the case.
Okay.
There are two examples that come to mind. One, I'm working with a company that 10 years ago had an access database built for their contract management software. And at the time, for the size they were, that worked. But they are growing so fast, and they have a process, their processes are starting to get weighed down by the technology. I mean, the access database is just on its last leg. So I'm building out a new system for them, but not just, taking that access database and copying it into a new architecture. We're talking about changing processes along the way. And this is probably the first time that they've had the chance to step back a little bit and think about that sort of stuff. So the other thing that I think is a good analogy here is think of Starbucks. Probably, I think it was in 2006, maybe. Their Howard Schultz, who just came back as chairman, actually, there's a story in a book of his I've read where he was just happened to be in one of the stores, and he noticed that they could not pull an espresso shot correctly, and the store smelled like burned cheese because the sandwiches they were doing, they weren't cooking them or putting them in correctly or something. And this was at the height of their growth period, where the joke was that you could walk out of a Starbucks and there'd be another one on the next corner right across the street. So he realized, we're focusing too much on growth and profits and bottom line. We're not focusing on the processes behind what we do. So they closed. He closed down the stores, every store, for an afternoon, and they retrained. They thought hard about what they were doing. They shut down for a while to just take the external pressure off and focus on internal processes and getting it right. Now, they lost, I don't know how much in sales they lost that afternoon worldwide, but the money that they made long term far outweighs that loss, because they were able to step back, think critically, reevaluate, and go, this is how we need to do things. And they were that much more successful for it. And that's what we're encouraging businesses to do. Stop doing band-aid stuff. Stop just trying to keep the lights on. It's okay to step back a little bit. And it doesn't have to be a complete shutdown. Nobody's asking for that. It's more of just take a minute to breathe and think critically.
Yeah. Do you think it's a bit counterintuitive to think like this? Because the culture that we see around is to not stop and just keep on going as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
it is. And
yeah.
also what's that phrase, fake it until you make it.
Yeah.
There is well, I know this has been in the news a lot. Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes. That is a really extreme case of faking it until you make it, because they had nothing behind all of that shiny exterior. But the culture supported that, right? Like it was rewarding, basically being liars.
Yeah.
And there was no point at which, and if you read the book, and I know now it's on Netflix or something, but the Wall Street Journal reporter who originally did the story, he wrote a book called Bad Blood. And reading that, it was so clear that anybody who stopped to question and did not toe the line of, we need to push this out, we just need to get it done, just get it done, they were ostracized or completely kicked out of the company. And it was like, we don't support critical thinking. And I mean, that's a very extreme example, but it is a good hyperbole or exaggeration of sort of what we're seeing in businesses, the rest of us, every other business that's not Theranos.
Yeah. And the data silo problem that you just mentioned, right? It seems to me that with every passing week and month, the amount of data will simply keep on increasing, and it will just become more and more difficult for companies to really turn around. So when you are talking to, let's say, companies who are resistant to what you guys are proposing, do you see this lack of long-term perspective in them as well, where they are not ready to admit what you guys are trying to say? And you can clearly see that, the way you guys are going, it's gonna crash someday.
Either in business practice or in culture. And there's one example here of a variant of this process that I started, running. It was an early version of this. It was when I was still kind of figuring out which way I wanted to go with commercializing it. It was before commercialization. We put the we put the survey instrument out to the full company. And because of the internal workings of the company, we did not get a chance to talk with the like most senior leadership, which was mistake number one, because this has to be led by executive. It has to have executive sponsorship. So we didn't get to do that. We got the instrument out there, but there was a lot of infighting over, well, you're a data person. Why are you asking culture questions? That's an HR thing. And then there was so much blowback from certain folks in the organization who felt like, well, wait a minute, you're asking my people about what they think about working here. That's, you can't ask that. And I learned a lot of lessons from that. One of them is, look, if you're more interested in managing egos than actually long-term thinking for the business, I don't care how profitable the company is. If bottom line is great, but it's a toxic place, then this will crash and burn at some point.
Yeah.
And that also is a good example of when to know just to walk away and say, well, okay, you want us to do this, but you want us to gut the thing so that we really don't have any usable data. This is not going to be a productive relationship. We just need to walk away. So there's a culture example of that. I think the other sort of more practical example, the more tangible, because culture is a very intangible thing. And I should say that company, despite that very odd happening, was still a wonderful company to work with, and it was just one of those things where you struck a nerve that you didn't know was there. So lesson learned, because for me, I see it as a pure academic research exercise. I don't care about I only want to see the aggregates. I don't care about the individual. But again, you have to empathize with what you are overstepping. You are coming into people's houses and you are asking questions. And so I've learned a lot of empathy from that too, how to manage the messaging and the political part of it. But again, the other part of it is the more tangible side, which is with the onslaught of businesses producing petabytes of data and the matching sort of onslaught of, there's so many analytics products out there, there's so many vendors out there, there are so many consultants out there, and they're all throwing around these buzzwords. You really can't blame a business for almost developing some anxiety, going, we have to stay abreast of this, we have to do this stuff. And there's not much time for critical thinking when you realize your competition may be 5 steps ahead of you in the analytics game, and you got to do something fast. So it's in that case, I think it's more of a I don't want to say cultural thing, because I mean it in a different way here, but it's more of a noise in the space where businesses just don't know who to listen to.
So I had a very interesting conversation with a CEO of this website called voices.com.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an audio transcription service. So, for example, if you're making an ad and if you want a voice actor to, read a script for you, you simply submit the request and they will get it done for you. Right? And it's a company from Canada, very successful company. And I got to spend 20 minutes talking to the CEO, right? And they started back in 2005 and 6, and they were one of the first customers of AWS S3. And he mentioned that back in the days they used to rent out server spaces like racks, physical server spaces. And he's like, back in the day, the bills used to be around $2,000, $3,000. And then we switched to AWS S3 and the bills went down to $20, $30, $40.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So my question to him was pretty simple as to, when you are a CEO of such a platform, You are supposed to take care of the branding of the company, the marketing, the sales, the technology decisions of the company. So how do you manage with the noise, right? And what he explained to me was that I take a 1 to 2 month off, not like a complete off, but I don't consume anything except for the one decision that I'm supposed to make. So, for example, if you're deciding to switch from AWS to GCP, I'll just block 2 months of my time and just educate myself about GCP on my own and then make a decision about it.
Wow.
Yeah. So I found that approach, I would say, extreme because,
Yeah.
and he really enjoys doing that. So, I mean, that works for him. But how many people do you think would be able to do something like that, where they self-educate themselves about different aspects of the business and then try to make the most informed decision after that? And
That's a luxury.
okay, that's a
That
good
that
point.
really is a luxury. And this is why, I think you'll find a lot of CEOs will say, "Well, I have other people that handle these things." Um, and that's not a bad thing. Like for me, for example, I know that once our company grows to a certain point, I don't need to be CEO anymore because
Yeah.
I need someone who can really drive the business. I'm too close to the tech to
Yeah.
like I want to be founder and one of the tech guys. I want to be chief technical officer. So knowing your limits, that's one thing. Um, I think it can be done in smaller chunks, maybe like take a weekend to do it.
Yeah.
The worst thing though is when you get someone who doesn't know the space at all. And like I worked way back. I worked with a company, big like aerospace company, where I did some consulting for their HR department,
Yeah.
and they wanted to do some predictive analytics around attrition.
Mhm.
And their introduction to this was watching the movie Moneyball,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
um,
Wow.
we clashed a little bit because I'm going, hey, not to pull the education card here, but like I've got a master's in education with a lot of hours in quantitative research, and you watched a film and some YouTube videos. So when you're arguing with me about whether this model approach is right, i'm I'm probably going to think I'm right here just by basis of the number of references we could produce on our reasoning, and I still kind of cringe when I think about that because I never wanted to play that angle, but it's hard when you're trying to help and you're trying to you hired me because I have expertise in this field, so I love when let's say they would they made of course they came at it a different way, but in other cases where you've got the business SME and they have tried to bone up on what you're doing so you can at least talk. I love that, and I love watching the light bulbs turn on over their heads, and I teach this stuff, I teach classes, and I treat clients the same way as I would students, so I want that exchange. But when you're uh, I guess so convinced that you know it all after watching a couple of YouTube videos, that's really hard to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you mention about your research, right? This is the one question which I still have no good answer for.
Mhm.
So you mentioned that you have a hypothesis, a question that you want to research on, and as you go deeper and deeper into it, more things are revealed to you. There is a revelation that
Yeah.
takes place,
Yeah.
and then you pivot according to revelations. So how do you decide that the direction I took was a good one? Question number one. Like,
Hmm.
okay, this is the right direction from the last revelation, I took a right for it, like it was a good one. And then how do you reach a point where you understand that I got it, and this can be helpful in the market?
I think the first one, just by the nature of inquiry and research, and particularly data science, there really is no wrong. Well, let me be careful here. I don't want to say there is no wrong conclusion, because that's a false. That's a very false statement. It's like feedback. There's really no bad feedback, because even the worst you can use constructively. The same thing with conclusions. If I test a hypothesis and I fail, then it's the same learning as if I succeeded. Now, does that mean that I go back to my original question and go somewhere else with it? Or do I stay where I am and use that knowledge to then go forward? So I guess the question there is, do you keep going forward, or do you backtrack and try another way?
Yeah, that's what I feel.
That's going to be decided really every time. Bad results from a data perspective are just as useful as what you expected results, right? So that's a hard one. The other, oh gosh, what was your second question?
The second question was, you make a conclusion that you are in the right direction. Now, how do you decide that, that's it, I need to stop here and I need to take this to the market, for example, and build a company after it?
Being able to see it in practice first as a research instrument. When I was doing the work with my companies I researched with, all of them said, we need this. And that was enough of a start in validation to really say, okay, let's look at this as a serious commercial tool. And then I have just been really tapping into my LinkedIn network and just connecting with a handful of people every day and going, here's who I am, here's what I'm doing. This comes out of my academic research. I'm really just trying to get some perspective on, do you see value in this? And whether they do or they don't, again, that's good feedback. Some of those turn into actual engagements, but I am still just very interested in the market feedback. And that's been really valuable, because it's helped me think of new industries to apply it to. And it also means that we're going to have a chance to do it in different commercial markets and see, is this as useful or valuable in this vertical as it is in another one. And so it's learning by doing, essentially.
That makes sense to me. So I think one thing you discussed is a lot of companies that started, let's say, a decade ago are already on a journey. And because of that, there are a lot of silos in their data. So how about, you start working with new companies that started, let's say, 2-3 years ago, like startups, for example, and fix the problem before it even starts?
Oh, that's a wonderful thing. So so no joke. I was driving last week, and I was listening to Marketplace on NPR. I listen every day. And they were doing these entrepreneur stories. And there's a company, and I don't have permission to I never really asked her, but because I don't have explicit permission, I'm not going to say who it is. But there's a company that just started maybe about a year ago. And I was listening, and it one thing, it resonated to me with her startup story. But also I got to thinking about, her business model. She is dealing with a lot of data. I wonder what she's doing to manage it. I wonder if she has a data strategy this early on. And so I emailed her and said, heard your story on NPR, loved it. I talked a little bit about, identifying with her startup experience. And then I said, I'm curious about, what your data landscape looks like. And so we actually had a call a few days ago, and she she said, "Man, your timing is so good." She does a lot of her stuff on index cards,
Oh,
and yeah, and there's a couple of web portal apps that she's using, and some basic CRM stuff. But right now as she characterized it, it's a bit of a mess because it's one of those things where it started as this very tiny seed, and as it scaled up, she never had the chance to think long term about supporting that scale up with the right tech. So I sent her a few questions, just as sort of almost an intake. What do you like about what you have now? What do you don't like? If I waved a magic wand and you had the perfect system, and just some other deeper questions on sort of the process. And man, she sent back just some great answers. And this is one of those cases where you've got an opportunity to build the right processes from the beginning. And I would say it's even better because she's very early in it. It's not
yeah.
like she's just starting. She's got existing data, she has existing practices, but she's not so uh, she hasn't dug her heels in to that. She's not been around 10 years, and this is the way we always done it. She's got enough experience to know what works and what doesn't, but she's early enough to where it's still very pliable.
So I think you are at a stage where you're looking to commercialize the technology.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think we also had a discussion as to how to do that, how to basically do that better.
Yeah.
So why not focus on a segment of the market which is startups and only work with them, let's say for in the beginning of even your journey,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of problems startups face, I think you will be able to empathize with them more because I'm just suggesting definitely,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think they don't have a very risky decision to make because they are in the future, and if you can, maybe work with them right in the beginning, just like this story that you are describing right now,
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be very productive. What are your thoughts on it?
I think you're absolutely right, and it's a complementary model to so the LDIS Plus that we've got, which is the framework I invented. You have to have a critical mass just to get statistical power.
Okay.
So enterprise companies, let's say ideally 50 or more people.
Okay.
And there's where you're, like say for example, a big software provider, they can use that in the top of their sales funnel. But it's almost, I think about these companies that do these big enterprise software products, and then they have like a free version for like maybe 2 to 3 people companies, right? So I kind of see it the same way here, where look, we've got this big enterprise product,
Mm-hmm.
but we also have this sort of specialty service or product where we take all the things that we've learned from the enterprise experience,
Mm-hmm.
and we work with those startups at early stage at a very reduced price, in some cases purely just in exchange for some good feedback and good publicity, because we're still a startup too, right? We all got to help each other, and we don't do the LDIS Plus because there's just not enough people to do it. But we still take those same principles and we help them build out best practices. So I think you're spot on with that, because you can use you can use your main sort of line of business to inform the other.
Hmm. Have you been speaking out about your framework in public, like in a seminar or a workshop?
Just getting started on that. So there is a conference in Las Vegas every year that I've been to quite a bit and presented a few times. It's the International Conference on Data Science, and that's where I've done most of my talks. I am getting into the sort of the world of more of the industry side of speakers and white papers and that sort of thing, and still navigating that So that's going to be very necessary. And I think finding partners who are willing to, kind of go in together on a white paper or a webinar or whatever it may be to say, hey, here's how this helped our company. That's going to be a big deal. And I'm not great at it, but and I've actually got on my list to do. I kind of go in spurts with LinkedIn content. For a while, I was posting little nuggets from my dissertation every day, and now I ran out of those. So I've been silent for a while on scheduled content. So I need to put more out there. And there are other podcasts that I'm being invited to, and also working with some of the local universities here to one of them we're looking at some sort of data analytics innovation center, because in the upstate of South Carolina we're heavy on research, automotive, and manufacturing, and life sciences. And data analytics, we've got a really good sort of green field to do some good work. And there are programs around here, even at the liberal arts colleges, which is where I want to do this at, in analytics and data science.
And is is it a good idea to, for example, partner with a accelerator or a VC firm who is trying to help founders and entrepreneurs?
That's where I started. I remember at my first presentation out in Las Vegas when I was presenting my early dissertation sort of proposal. There is a company or organization, or I don't know what they are officially, here in the state that has the word research in their name. And so naturally I thought, well, hey, I've got some doctoral research here. I want to commercialize it. This seems to be what they do. And I'd say I maybe have talked to them 10 to 20 times over the last couple of years. And every time they find a new way to tell me you're not a fit. So there's that. And then all the other sort of venture capital incubators, that sort of thing. Where I am right now, everybody knows Greenville, South Carolina, we're getting a lot of good press nationally for a lot of different reasons. It's a good place to live, good place to start a business. And so there's this major emphasis on entrepreneurs and startups. And it's kind of difficult when you're in the middle of all that, but I've been to all of them. And the system is just not mature enough yet to support something like this. In the very beginning, it was really discouraging because the messaging was we want to help everybody. And so uninitiated, I'm like, okay, well, let's talk. And after you go to 4 or 5 of these and they tell you you're not a fit, or you don't have an idea, or you're going to fail, or you can't scale up, or whatever the reason is, you really start to think, well, if they're here to help everybody and they won't help me, then maybe I don't have a good idea. And I really started to get really discouraged. And I luckily started, I found one group that was very helpful. Started talking with one of their cohort leaders, and just started branching out and going, look, at least they acknowledge that the system here is not very mature. They want to focus on companies that are further along than me, that have a tangible product and can scale up and exit and make a lot of money. And that's not the company I want to build. I want to build something that, brings in local talent, that nurtures that talent and maintains a presence here. So we're not a fit, but internationally and nationally, I'm finding a lot of success. There are 2 companies in Europe that we expect to sign a partnership with, that we can help them with their U.S. launch, U.S. and North America. And there's my business partner actually is a leader of an accelerator. He's in Nashville. and he's got some great Fortune 500 experience, and he's introducing me to a lot of different people who get it. I mean, they get it. And so it's been really nice to see that, and then have the perspective to look back on the resources here and realize, they're not malicious. They're not meaning anything negative. It's just they're just not ready. It's not a mature system enough, and that's okay. And then I turn back around and go, okay, well, I want to help that. So I want to work with the universities on this area of innovation. I want to help the things that I experienced. I don't want another heavy research based business to go through here and get to the point where they just want to bow out.